in 2011, I kind of bought the first like personal car Lamborghini, and it was a blue Chalhoub 2004 Gallardo that came in on a tow truck, and it was not running, and it was in really rough condition. And there were these two Asian truck drivers that didn't speak English, and we thought they were kind of asking us to figure out what was wrong with the car. We really didn't know, and so we just ran it through the shop, and it was leaking oil terribly, brakes, tires, everything was spent, clutch was gone, but it was an okay car. It was in one piece. I checked the Carfax. It had a minor accident, but didn't look too bad. The paintwork was decent, but we really didn't know. And they'd left us a phone number with this car, and it was like, nobody answered, or it didn't go through, whatever. And so a few days go by, and this guy shows up, and he goes, "Do y'all have a blue Lamborghini here that you're trying to fix?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we do." And I would normally greet people that walk towards service. And he said, "Well, it's not mine, but it belongs to my girlfriend's daughter, and she's really attractive." And I'm okay, that will not change our level of service, sir, but it's always nice to know. And I said, "Well, can we speak to her?" He's like, "Well, no, you can't talk to her, but I'll get you in touch with her mom." Okay. And so a couple days later, I give him my card. The mom calls, and she says that her daughter had gotten arrested for going 180 miles an hour in this car. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, that's pretty meaningful. But it meant that the car recently was able to go 180 miles an hour, which is a promising thing. And the car was so rough at that time, like trying to sell bad condition exotic cars was nearly impossible because dealerships weren't trying to put much in inventory. The economy was still recovering. We couldn't sell the nice stuff, much less like rats like this. And so I was like, man, this thing might get cheap. And I knew that if I was willing to try, I was not going to be bidding against anybody. And I also suspected that there was a good chance that whenever we found this girl, that she was not going to be able to pay what was probably going to be a $20,000 to $30,000 service bill. And so the only way we were ever going to get the service business was for me to buy the car and finance it into a loan because I didn't have the cash either. And I could tell from the Carfax that there was not a lien against it. So a lot of times when you buy these cars cheap, it doesn't matter if they're willing to let you have it cheap, they can't pay off their loan. That would have been much more. And so it was probably another week, and this girl shows up. And she was a prostitute, and she was not appealing to my demographic. I think as a target, whatever. But she came in, and I actually found her social media profile, and it said that she had 50-inch hips. So I mean, this girl could take a break hula hooping. I mean, it was a marvel of science. And so we're talking about the car, and she said that she had bought it about a year earlier in cash in Miami, and I came to find out it was cash that she had earned in 3 months of work. So she was churning some business through. And she was not in a position to do it, but she did have the title, and she wanted to sell it. And I had asked my boss, like, if I can buy it, is that okay? Like, sometimes that's iffy as a dealership employee if this is going to be all right. And so he's like, yeah, sure. If you can get it done and you'll give us a service business, do whatever you want. And so she wanted like 70,000 because, she thinks, well, it'll be worth what I paid for it. I said, not exactly. There's also these other million things wrong with it and stuff like that. And I explained to her why it was less, and I offered her 30 grand. And of course, she was a shrewd negotiator. So we met right smack dab in the middle at 30 grand. And so I'm like, all right, well, do you want to buy another car? Obviously, if somebody just doesn't have a car. And she's like, well, I'd really like a Bentley like Paris Hilton's, a pink one. I said, well, they don't really paint them pink, so we probably don't want to do that. We could wrap a car. Let me look. And we could get, at the time, you could buy a Continental GT for probably 40, 50 grand. And I'm like, well, let's just go see if we can get you a loan for the rest. And she's great. She fills out our credit app. She had her social security card with her. And we pulled her credit, and nobody had ever even looked at this girl's credit. She didn't even know she had a bank account, anything like that. And I learned that in particular after we found out that there was nobody wanting to be the first person to loan her money in her short life at that point. And because I was like, well, we'll just give you a check. And so I went back to our office. We cut her a check for 30 grand, and I handed it to her. And I, as a car salesman, had never had somebody look at me with less trust than when I told her that piece of paper was the same thing as $30,000. And she's like, what do I do with this? Oh, you take it to your bank. Said, what? I said, can you not just give me cash? I said, no, we don't have cash here, but I promise you it's good. And she left like super suspicious, like there's no way this is money. And it worked out. We stayed in touch. In fact, she had the spare key to the car, and she kept telling me she was going to bring it, and she never would, or she'd come up with some excuse. And must have been 3 months later, she texted me, and she's like, it's my birthday tomorrow. Do you still want that key? I'm like, again, like I'm getting a lot of unrelated information in this deal. And I said, happy birthday. And yes, I'd love it. And she's like, well, can I have $100 for it? I'm like, well, it's not worth anything to anybody but me. But you know what? Sure. By all means. But I'll give you $100 if you have it here by close of business. And she didn't show up, of course. But the next day, her birthday, she showed up, and I don't know what she would call what she was wearing. I would call it a basketball net. It holes everywhere. You could see everything. She had a lot of interesting tattoos in interesting places that were probably uncomfortable to acquire. And she walks in. At the time, there was this woman standing at our parts counter with this young kid. She grabs this kid and screams and runs out another door. And Kimmy walks up to me, and she loves to hug. I always want to hug you first. And so I'm like, hey, Kimmy, what are you all dressed up for? And she said, it's my birthday. I said, well, you're halfway to that outfit. And I said, you got the key? She did. And I went out and tried it and gave her money. And I was like, man, we had had a lot of conversations at that point. She was like commenting on my Instagram posts. She was really fond of the ones that had my large albino boa constrictor in it. But we were sitting at my desk talking. I said, Kimmy, do you have butt implants? Like, how does this happen? And she's like, no. And she was so excited to like talk me through the science of this. She's like, I had a fat redistribution. And this was before like the Kardashian world of this was a thing. Yeah. And so she's like, they made me gain 30 pounds and then they liposuctioned it all out and they injected it. She didn't have to move anything. You could see the scar. It must have been a jackhammer they put it in with. And it was, and so I said, wow. And so not only did I get buy the cheapest Gallardo ever, but I got to meet the recipient of such a pioneering medical procedure.
I would love to see her today. Have her back on the channel. Like a soft white underbelly sort of interview.
How successful that surgery is, after all this time has passed.
I asked her, does it feel weird? Is it moving around like independent of the direction you travel? But she said it was all normal-ish, I guess. I don't know. But when we first started to record VINWiki stories, I thought it was just going to be a promotional tool for the app that we'd released about a year prior. And we had a lot of ideas about what we might do with the content. And I thought maybe I would give it to a friend of mine that had a car YouTube channel. Because at the time I knew like Doug DeMuro from college, and I'd met Rob Ferretti a few times and Freddie Hernandez and some of these guys. And so I sold Rob Dom his Diablo while I was at the dealership. He was the first person to ever list social media income on a credit application for me. And so I was trying to figure out like, what we were going to do with it. So I just called a bunch of friends. We got a bunch of pizza and beer, sat in the corner of the warehouse, stacked some stuff up in the corner, hang some Edison bulbs and see what happens. And a friend of mine from church shot them all and edited them. And so I had compiled most of my good car stories from the dealership as intros to the chapters of my book on setting the cannonball record, because really it was just a story of three sweaty guys going really fast and not getting caught across the country. And so I realized that's not really going to carry people's attention throughout 300 pages. So I had written down like my 10 best stories as the openings to the chapters that would have something in common with whatever was happening at that moment in the journey. So I'd written out the story of buying that car, and So I had, I think of the 25, probably 7 or 8 were my stories. And I didn't know that anybody was going to watch them. I figured we're going to release 25 of these things after all my friends said, no, we can't put them on their channels. We started them on the VINWiki channel. And I was like, man, if we got 2,000 views a video, that would be amazing. And we ended up getting almost 1 million views across those videos, and it started to grow really, really well. And some things like that got a lot more traction than I ever expected them to. I'm like, well, I don't know if she's going to care that this story is out there. And so a couple of years ago, a friend of mine is like, I want to go find her. And I'm like, okay, probably better you than me, given the chance that she could be upset about the way that I've described her. And I thought I was diplomatic in it, but who knows? And so he goes out and he finds that she is currently incarcerated. And for another professional appearance, we'll say. And she was going to get out at a certain point. So he starts like emailing her. And I'm like, the only thing I'd ask is like, if she doesn't know about it, don't tell her about it. Let's deal with it another day. And it doesn't take long for him to ask her about, what she did before and stuff like that. And she volunteers that she had a Lamborghini and that apparently there's some guy named Ed that talks about it on the internet. So she had heard about, apparently a guard recognized her from my description and asked her about it and figured out that it was her. And so she was very happy about it. She'd learned since then that like OnlyFans has started and all her old friends are making a ton of money doing that. And it was, and so she wants to come on when she gets out and tell her side of the story, which I think is going to be amazing. So the problem is like, it's very hard she has a long sentence because of multiple accusations that can maybe be shortened. So we may do some fundraising to help
not do an
free Kimmy.
Interview in jail. That would make it even better.
So when I asked about it, which maybe that means it was a little more than 2 years ago, there were COVID restrictions on visitation. Then she moved to a different place and stuff like that. So I have not broached that recently. She did not want to do it in jail, even though we talked through it because she wanted to get all dolled up and look more professional.
Yeah.
And and so we have not come to such an arrangement, but she's very excited to meet the audience.